and a little bit of love on the way in a moment, but a lady's written a book about love, why love hurts and why self-love is the key. What can that be about? Joins us right now because we want to talk about coming out of lockdown. There's a lot of stress around the moment, whether you're focusing on vaccination or when you can next see your loved ones. I definitely am. I haven't seen Mum for ages, nor my sister. Perhaps you're wondering about your holidays. Are they going to happen? Will you be able to go abroad? Will you even be able to do a staycation? And what about coming out of lockdown? Will there be a break put on that? Will we be reversed back into some kind of lockdown hell as we hope we come out of it? Well, we've got our issues, we've got our stresses, and hopefully Keely Taverner, a psychotherapist who's written this book, can join us and help us with our thoughts about this. Hello, Keely.
Hey, how you doing?
Very well, thank you. Intrigued by the title of your book, Why Love Hurts and Why Self-Love is the Key. What do you mean by self-love?
Well, I mean, it's all about how we regard ourselves, and if we don't have a regard for ourselves and we go around expecting someone to worship and adore us, and then that creates a whole load of problems, especially if you've got unhealthy, in terms of how we were raised, how we were brought up, how we were loved by our parents, that shapes us. And so my book really is all about helping people to understand what they need to do to change their narrative in intimate relationships.
And when you say why love hurts, I mean, obviously we're thinking of couples, married or otherwise, but I guess this could go in any sort of relationship, parent-child relationship.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think one thing with the lockdown, so many of our relationships have been tested. Some have withered on the vine, and some will blossom, and there'll be a new horizon for many of us, be it friends, family, work colleagues. So fundamentally, I'm a massive believer that relationships are key. They're fundamental to our well-being. Often, people come into therapy and they don't quite realize that actually it's many of our relationships that actually can influence our mental health and well-being.
You mentioned something about how we were brought up ourselves, and what is it they say about parenting? It's just a way of mentally scarring young people. It's almost unavoidable. What can we learn about that, and what can we do about it? It's been and gone, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, humans, we're complex beings, I think we can't, our foundations, our relationships set the foundation. They're the blueprint for our adult intimate relationships, our adult relationships altogether. So if we grew up insecure, if we had intermittent love, if it wasn't safe and consistent, that has a detrimental impact on us in adulthood. If we're left baffled why we keep attracting users, losers, and abusers, then beginning to understand that, in terms of how those relationships of nature is such a helpful way for people to be gay. Like, I get it now. I absolutely get it.
Don't we all attract losers, users, and abusers? Don't we have to work through these people who don't work with us until we find Mr. or Mrs. Right?
Well, you see, I'm not a big fan of the whole finding the one, kind of like, Neo in the Matrix. I'm more of a fan of if you can learn how to love yourself, it means that, we no longer bend over backwards or people please, that kind of begins to slow down, so that we're not constantly saying yes to everybody else, which is a recipe, which is one of the reasons why people get depressed. So that we begin to sort of stand our own ground. For many people, there's such a big fear of being alone, of being with oneself. Therefore, if we can take steps to begin to like ourselves, that is incredibly healthy, because when nonsense behavior comes your way, that if you can get over that fear of being alone or being with yourself, can be incredibly helpful. I know it's been incredibly helpful for me in my relationships.
Closest relationships during lockdown. I guess many of us may have learned that our relationships are actually, without us realizing it happening, become broken beyond repair. What should those people do?
Well, I think there's no two ways about it. It's a bit like, after Christmas, there's always a spike in divorce as people spend more time together when we're not so busy. So with lockdown, that time together has been pretty intense. And I think there are kind of, you know, there are decent ways to have a breakup. It doesn't have to all be slinging mud. Sometimes, and I know, you know, it's a part of my practice that has been busy with couples wanting to have the difficult conversation and wanting a decent split, especially when, you know, children are involved, or with, you know, we may have come from broken families ourselves where it's been a dirty divorce, that some people are choosing to seek professional help to begin to start to make a way, in a way that is reasonable and works for both parties. That's not always the case. Sometimes people do move on to mediation, but beginning that space for communication can be particularly important.
Your book is called Why Love Hurts and Why Self-Love is the Key. Could it be that if you're finding love hurts time and time again, that you yourself might be the problem?
Indeed, but nobody wants to do that. That's why when they come to therapy and they're going to bang on to me about what Fred did in 1985, I'm like, sister, we ain't doing this. We're going to look at you. And often one of the things that hurts us so much is high expectations. I specialize in helping individuals who are in narcissistic, empath dynamic relationships. And empathic people can give way too much, have poor boundaries, and if they do get caught in that unhealthy dynamic, it can be quite devastating for people.
So you need to, this is the self-love thing, I guess.
Most definitely. Most definitely. That's where we come back. So we come back to the self, looking at how we feel about ourselves. For so many people, they invest all in a relationship, and their own dreams and ambitions get sidelined, which is not healthy, because we all need our own identities in relationship. Otherwise we get into enmeshment where we lose ourselves, which is very painful when you wake up one day and just don't know who you are anymore, because you've just given it and given and given.
And away from sort of these most intimate relationships, the people we've been stuck with during lockdown, the people we've been separated from during lockdown, this is often between generations, isn't it? As we come back to meet these people once again, I mean, I've seen my mum once since well, in a year, which is ridiculous. You know, I would never see it that infrequently normally. Is there anything we need to arm ourselves with, anything we need to think before we get back to some sense of normality?
I think you know, one of the courses I run is called Pain into Purpose, and what we do on Pain into Purpose is we look at the lessons that come from adversity. And that is what this situation has provided us with. Yes, there's been lots of difficult things, but actually being that maybe people are realizing that life is so fickle and can change in a heartbeat, how do we need to live more fully, love more fully, make time for people, say yes, not put things off? I think that in itself can be a real positive. You know, even things like on a practical day-to-day, cooking from scratch. Everybody's out walking. I know I'm hitting my 10,000 steps a day. You know, so what can we take from some of those principles? Because often, you know, in the West, we've kind of been focused on planning and felt like we've had control. Yet in developing countries, we know that they often tend to live day to day, which is what we've had to do. And there can be a blessing in that. It can teach us how to live more in the now, being that the future is not in our control and the past has gone.
I think we're rubbish at living in the now, generally.
Definitely.
This has been lovely speaking to you, Keely. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're most welcome. Take care.
Will do. And you, that's Keely Taverner, who's got a book out, Why Love Hurts and Why